The Outback is the name given to Australia's vast interior region, an area that covers most of the country and has an extremely low population density. Stretching across multiple states and territories, this region is famous for its red plains, arid deserts, and harsh climate conditions. Unlike the densely populated coastal regions, the Outback contains only scattered small towns surrounded by seemingly endless open landscapes. For generations, the Outback has played an important role in Australia's exploration history while preserving many ancient Aboriginal cultural traditions. Landmarks such as Uluru, Kata, Tjuta, and Kings Canyon have transformed this dry wilderness into one of Australia's most recognizable tourist destinations. What has enabled people to survive and build communities in one of the harshest environments on Earth? Along the Stuart Highway crossing central Australia, the gigantic red rocks of Devil's Marbles, Karlu, suddenly appear across the dry plains, as if they had been thrown down from another world. Thousands of granite boulders lie scattered on both sides of the road, many balanced on top of one another in strange formations within the burning desert of the Northern Territory. The granite core of Karlu began forming around 1.7 billion years ago, as magma slowly cooled beneath Earth's ancient crust. Across millions of years, extreme temperatures, wind, and rare rainfall continuously fractured and rounded the granite into its present shapes. For the Warramungu, Kaitetje, Alyaware, and Warlpiri peoples, however, this land is far more than a geological phenomenon. The red stones are considered part of sacred dreaming stories connected to ancestral beings. In 1953, one boulder was illegally removed to build a memorial in Alice Springs, creating decades of cultural conflict before the stone was finally returned in 1999. By 2008, ownership of the land was officially handed back to the indigenous communities. During the day, the granite surfaces absorb heat so intensely that the air around Karlu visibly trembles beneath the desert sun. Low drought-resistant shrubs grow between the rocks where lizards and desert birds hide from the extreme temperatures. During ceremonial gatherings, indigenous people cover their bodies with red ochre and wear necklaces crafted from animal teeth, feathers, and wild seeds. Traditional life here has always depended on collecting acacia seeds, desert fruits, and small animals surviving in the harsh, semi-arid environment. The final light of day gradually transforms Karlu from bright orange into deep red and dark violet. Some enormous boulders balance upon narrow bases so precariously that they appear ready to collapse at any moment, despite remaining unchanged for millions of years. Today, this place remains an important stop along Australia's transcontinental highway, while also serving as a core site for protecting Indigenous cultural law. How many places in the world still treat every stone as a living part of ancestral memory? From a distance, the mesas of the Breakaways look like fragments of a continent that were torn apart and abandoned across the stony deserts of South Australia. These flat-topped hills stand isolated from the Stuart Range, rising alone within a landscape almost completely devoid of life. Located about 20 miles north of Coober, the region lies inside Kanku Breakaways Conservation Park and is considered one of the strangest landscapes in the Australian Outback. Few people realize that tens of millions of years ago, this entire region once lay beneath an ancient inland sea. As the waters disappeared and Earth's crust slowly rose upward, wind and desert rain began stripping away softer sediment layers, leaving behind the flat-topped sandstone mesas that survive today. Over thousands of years, the land became a hunting and travel route for the Anangu people. In 2013, the South Australian government officially granted joint management rights of the conservation park to the Antakarinja Matuntjara Yankunit Jatjara community, and renamed the area Kanku Breakaways to recognize Indigenous cultural ownership. No towns, farms, or permanent settlements exist within this protected region. For Indigenous communities, the land remains a sacred spiritual space connected to ancient Chukurpa stories, especially the legend of two dogs guarding the desert. During seasonal journeys across the harsh terrain, survival depended on hunting kangaroos, gathering berries after short rainfalls, and searching for wild desert food among drought-resistant shrubs. Today, the ecosystem still belongs to dingoes, emus, rock wallabies, and reptiles adapted to the extreme desert heat. The Breakaways changes color almost constantly throughout the day. In the morning, the cliffs appear cream white and pale gold. By late afternoon, the entire mesa landscape turns deep orange and dark purple, resembling a gigantic oil painting stretched across the earth. Its surreal appearance has transformed the region into the setting for several famous post-apocalyptic films, where the natural scenery resembles a distant planet more than modern Earth. Today, the region holds an important role within South Australia's systems of ecological preservation and Indigenous cultural heritage. Breakaways has also become a major symbol of successful land co-management between the Australian government and Aboriginal communities. After hundreds of miles of plains that seem to have no ending, the land suddenly stops at the edge of towering white cliffs before plunging directly into the dark waters of the Great Australian Bight. This massive bay stretches along the southern coast of Australia, where cold waves from the Southern Ocean constantly crash against the Bungle cliffs beneath the almost completely empty Nullarbor plain. Australia and Antarctica were once still connected before gigantic tectonic movements separated the two continents from the supercontinent Gondwana around 50 million years ago. That process created the enormous open bay that exists today. Thousands of years before European ships appeared offshore, the Murning people lived along the coastal cliffs and considered these waters sacred territory tied to their ancestors and the giant marine creatures beyond the horizon. In 1627, Dutch navigator Francois Thijssen became one of the first Europeans to record this violent stretch of ocean during his voyage along Australia's southern coast. The cold and dark surface of the Great Australian Bight hides one of the world's most unique marine ecosystems. Southern right whales swim close to shore every breeding season, while distant cold currents support bluefin tuna, great white sharks, Australian sea lions, and countless albatrosses. Above the ocean cliffs, almost all large vegetation disappears beneath the constant force of salt-heavy winds blowing in from the sea. During the afternoon, the light above the Great Australian Bight often turns silver-gray before powerful winds sweep across the ocean surface. From head of Bight, whales occasionally rise directly beneath the cliffs before vanishing again beneath white layers of crashing waves. Along the coastline, the Bungle Cliffs stretch for more than 124 miles, like the final edge of the Australian continent, with almost no ports or large human settlements appearing anywhere along the shore. The Great Australian Bight remains one of the most important shipping routes connecting the Indian Ocean and the Pacific Ocean in the Southern Hemisphere. Beyond trade routes and natural resources beneath the continental shelf, this coastline still preserves a rare sense of wilderness, a region where cold winds, massive waves, and the endless scale of the ocean remain almost completely beyond human control. In the middle of the arid semi-desert of Central Australia, Uluru rises like a colossal sandstone monolith isolated within an endless sea of red sand. This is a massive rock formation located in the Northern Territory, standing about 1,142 feet above the surrounding plain. Flat desert plains stretch for hundreds of miles around its base, where summer temperatures often exceed 104 degrees Fahrenheit, and rainfall remains extremely unpredictable. Uluru began forming around 550 million years ago, beneath an ancient sea when layers of sediment were compressed and lifted by tectonic forces. Over millions of years of erosion, the harder rock remained behind, becoming one of the defining symbols of the Outback. But this place carries more than geological history. The Anangu people have lived around Uluru for at least 10,000 years. In 1985, the Australian government officially returned ownership of the land to the Indigenous community, and in 2019, climbing the rock was permanently banned to protect its sacred spiritual significance. Uluru has since become a major political symbol in Australia's reconciliation process with the continent's first inhabitants. Beneath the giant red rock, the Anangu people continue to preserve the Tjuta belief system, ancestral stories explaining the creation of the world and the laws governing human life. During major ceremonies, bodies are painted with red ochre and charcoal, while ornaments are woven from human hair, animal fur, and dried seeds. In an environment where water can disappear for months, survival depends on desert food sources such as wild berries, bush seeds, and witchetty grubs. The cracks around Uluru trap rare moisture, sustaining spinifex grass, mulga shrubs, eucalyptus trees, and drought-adapted animals, including wandering dingoes. As the sun moves across the desert sky, Uluru constantly changes color from deep red to burning orange before fading into dark purple at sunset. The immense stone walls reflect light as if they were smoldering from within. Beneath the rock, ancient caves preserve countless rock paintings that recount the history and ancestral journeys of the Anangu people across thousands of years. Uluru is not simply a rock in the desert. It is an ancient memory of Earth itself, the spiritual center of the Anangu people, and the greatest symbol of Australia's interior. In that vast and silent landscape, nature still reminds humanity that time will always outlast every civilization. There are roads in Australia where, after hours of driving, the landscape ahead still does not change at all. Nullarbor Plain exists like a gigantic emptiness across the continent, a place where the sky, the ground, and the horizon almost blend together. This limestone plain stretches across more than 77,220 square miles along the Great Australian Bight between South Australia and Western Australia. No forests, no mountains, no major rivers, only flat land extending endlessly toward the horizon. Around 25 million years ago, this entire region still lay beneath a vast ancient sea. After the ocean disappeared, layers of marine organisms accumulated into an enormous monolithic limestone formation covering the plain. Over millions of years, rainwater seeped through cracks and hollowed out the underground rock, creating cave systems and deep sinkholes beneath the dry surface. In 1867, explorer E. A. de Lisser named the region Nullarbor, meaning no trees. In the early 20th century, the Trans-Australian Railway appeared with a perfectly straight 297-mile section of track crossing the near total isolation of this land. The Mirning people lived along the Nullarbor coast long before modern transportation routes appeared. For them, the ocean cliffs and underground caves carry deep spiritual meaning. Life here survives quietly. Low saltbush shrubs cling to the ground. Southern hairy-nosed wombats dig beneath soft limestone. Dingoes wander through freezing desert nights. And southern right whales migrate past the Bungle cliffs every breeding season. Nullarbor does not impress through violent scenery, but through an almost unreal sense of emptiness. Hundreds of miles of uninterrupted flatland make the sky appear larger than normal. Along the southern edge, the Bungle cliffs rise suddenly before plunging straight into the ocean as limestone walls reaching up to 394 feet high and stretching for more than 62 miles. Farther inland, the Eyre Highway and the Trans-Australian Railway become endless straight lines disappearing into a landscape with no visible end. Nullarbor Plain remains the main transportation link between Western Australia and the rest of the country. Beyond its infrastructure role, the region still preserves a rare feeling of complete isolation, a place where nature does not need grandeur to remind people how small they truly are. Beyond the red plains where the hot winds never truly stop blowing, the gigantic stone domes of Kata Tjuta slowly emerge across the dry horizon. This is a formation of 36 massive rock domes located in the southern Northern Territory, about 227 miles southwest of Alice Springs. The surrounding landscape is dominated by flat desert terrain, cut apart by deep, narrow gorges and steep rock walls that almost completely seal off the interior valleys. Unlike isolated monolithic rocks formed from a single geological core, Kata Tjuta was created from multiple layers of ancient sediment dating back around 500 million years. Through the uplift of Earth's crust and millions of years of erosion caused by water and desert winds, the original rock mass gradually fractured into separate domes. In 1872, explorer Ernest Giles became the first European to see the site and named it Mount Olga. But in 1985, the Australian government officially returned ownership of the land to the Anangu people after decades of territorial disputes. Since then, the site has become a major symbol of shared land management between the state and Indigenous communities. Hidden deep within the dark, narrow valleys, the Pitjantjatjara Anangu people still preserve the Chukurpa belief system, ancestral stories explaining the creation of the world, and the laws governing human life. During major ceremonies, bodies are covered with white clay, red ochre, and sacred painted patterns. Jewelry is crafted from desert seeds, emu feathers, and seashells traded from distant coastal regions. Beneath a climate capable of scorching the ground itself, the shaded rock crevices continue to support spinifex grass, mulga trees, ancient ferns, and highly adapted species such as dingoes, rock wallabies, and thorny devils. As the final sunlight moves across the desert, the giant stone domes continuously shift in color from deep crimson to burning orange, before fading into pale pink at sunset. The highest dome rises about 1,791 feet above the dry outback plain. Between the massive rock walls, the Valley of the Winds and Walpa Gorge open like ancient corridors torn apart by millions of years of relentless erosion. In that isolated interior wilderness, nature does not exist as a silent background, but as an ancient force, still shaping every form of life. Those red stone domes resemble fragments of Earth's memory itself, far older than the history of humanity. The red dirt roads of Kimberley region can stretch for hundreds of miles without revealing any towns beyond a few isolated fuel stations scattered across the tropical wilderness of northern Western Australia. Surrounding this land are the Timor Sea, the Indian Ocean, and vast deserts that leave many areas almost completely isolated during the wet season. Beneath the ancient mountain ranges and plateaus lies geological ground more than 1.8 billion years old. Humans arrived here at least 40,000 years ago, leaving guion and Wangina rock art across sandstone cliffs throughout many gorges. In 1879, explorer Alexander Forrest surveyed the interior, opening the way for massive colonial cattle stations. By the late 20th century, the Argyle mine transformed the region into the world's largest source of pink diamonds before closing in 2020. More than 30 indigenous language groups still maintain cultural presence across Kimberley, especially around coastal communities and inland rocky regions. During traditional ceremonies, bodies are covered with red ochre alongside skirts woven from tree bark fibers and carved pearl ornaments worn across the chest. Local cuisine reflects a mixture of sea, desert, and tropical grasslands through barramundi, crocodile meat, kangaroo meat, and kakadu plums. The black and orange striped domes of Purnululu, the limestone gorges of Winjana, and the violent tidal currents of horizontal falls make this region feel more like a separate continent than an ordinary administrative area. Along the 410-mile Gibb River Road stand dry river crossings, isolated cattle stations, and endless red landscapes stretching toward the horizon. As evening falls over the Timor Sea, the rocky plateaus and red dust glow with a dark orange light. Minerals, offshore gas, South Sea pearls, and ecotourism have turned Kimberley into one of Northern Australia's most strategically important economic regions. Yet more than anything else, this place still feels like a landscape that humans have never fully managed to control. The sound of seawater roaring through narrow rock gaps transformed horizontal falls into one of the strangest natural phenomena in the Kimberley region. This site lies deep within Talbot Bay in the Buccaneer Archipelago of northwestern Australia and can only be reached by seaplane or boat, departing from Broome or Derby. Ancient vertical cliffs surrounding the dark blue water create a feeling of complete isolation from the outside world. Unlike ordinary waterfalls flowing downward from great heights, horizontal falls formed because of the enormous tidal differences within the Kimberley coast. Mountain gaps belonging to the McClarty Range, approximately 2 billion years old, created two parallel water passages, one about 66 feet wide and the other only about 33 feet wide. When tides change rapidly, with variations reaching up to 33 feet, massive volumes of seawater are forced through the rock gaps, generating steep, rushing currents resembling a horizontal waterfall across the ocean. In 2024, the Western Australian government, together with Indigenous representatives, agreed to end tourist boats passing directly through these narrow channels, beginning in 2028 in order to protect geological formations and sacred cultural values. Within the beliefs of the Dambimangari people, these waters belong to Lalang Garam, a sacred marine region connected with ancient spiritual forces. They believe the violent tidal currents should not be conquered or disturbed carelessly without ancestral permission. Around the rock passages, mangrove forests cling tightly to limestone formations, creating shelter for many migratory seabirds. Beneath the surface lives an ecosystem containing reef sharks, lemon sharks, giant cobia fish, and saltwater crocodiles. Instead of building hotels on land, all tourism facilities here operate from floating accommodations safely anchored within Talbot Bay. When tides reach their peak, white water surges violently through the narrow rock channels, creating enormous whirlpools crashing against the dark cliff walls. Viewed from above, blue water strips, mangrove forests, and ancient rock formations intertwine like a natural maze in the middle of the ocean. At sunset, sunlight reflecting across the constantly moving water turns the entire bay into the deep orange-red colors characteristic of the remote Kimberley region. Amid isolated ocean landscapes and violent tidal currents, horizontal falls still preserves the rare, untouched character of Australia's northwestern coastline. The combination of ancient geology, sacred indigenous culture, and extreme natural power transformed this place into one of Oceania's most extraordinary landscapes. Beneath the sunburned red plateau of Pilbara, Weano Gorge opens like a gigantic stone maze with dark, narrow cracks descending deep underground. This canyon lies inside Karijini National Park near the Weano Day Use area and has no permanent residents. Steep cliffs, deep blue pools, and dangerous terrain transform this place into one of Western Australia's most famous exploration routes. The rock layers of Weano Gorge began forming more than 2.5 billion years ago from iron and silica sediments deposited beneath an ancient ocean floor. Across millions of years, uplift within the Hamersley Range. And violent erosion carved deep geological fractures into narrow canyon systems lined with stacked red stone walls. This land remained under the traditional stewardship of the Banijima, Kurama, and Inawanga communities for tens of thousands of years, before becoming part of the Karijini conservation system in 1991. During the rainy season from October to April, flash floods frequently surge through the canyon at extreme speed, causing rescue operations near Handrail Pool to last for many hours. Rare, cool, and humid conditions at the canyon floor create shelter for many species adapted to the Pilbara semi-desert. Pilbara olive pythons, yellow-footed rock wallabies, and rock lizards move around natural pools, while eagles and falcons nest on towering cliffs. Above the canyon rim mainly grow spinifex grass and snappy gum eucalyptus trees, yet deep below appear moss, ancient ferns, and cajuput shrubs growing beside cold streams flowing through the red stone. Viewed from Oxer Lookout, Weano Gorge resembles a dark red crack slicing through the vast Pilbara Plateau. Pools such as Weano Pool and Handrail Pool reflect bright emerald green water between towering brick red cliffs that nearly block all sunlight. Rough steel ladders and handrails attached to the canyon walls guide explorers deeper into narrow passages where many sections require wading through cold water or pressing tightly against opposite rock walls to continue forward. Weano Gorge is not only a natural landmark of Pilbara, but also a place preserving ancient geological history and the long cultural heritage of Aboriginal communities. Scientific importance, unique ecosystems, and dangerous landscapes transformed this canyon into one of Western Australia's most significant protected regions. Far beyond the redstone valleys where the desert domes slowly disappear into the horizon, the towering cliffs of Kings Canyon suddenly emerge across the dry interior of Australia. This natural canyon lies within Watarka National Park in the George Gill Range of the southwestern Northern Territory. The entire landscape is divided by sandstone walls rising more than 328 feet above a deep valley where underground water still flows beneath the desert floor. This canyon system began forming around 440 million years ago from ancient Morini sandstone layers fractured by tectonic activity. Over millions of years, hot winds and rare rainfall continuously carved deeper into the red rock, creating the vertical cliffs and labyrinth-like gorges seen today. In 1872, explorer Ernest Giles became the first European to officially record the site. By the 20th century, legal ownership of the land was formally recognized for the Luritja people, the indigenous community that had lived here for thousands of years. Since then, Kings Canyon has become a major center for ecological conservation and ecotourism in northern Australia. Within the scorching desert gorges, the Luritja people still preserve ancient Chukurpa stories connected to water sources, valleys, and ancestral spirits. During traditional ceremonies, bodies are covered with desert-colored clay and sacred painted symbols. Jewelry is crafted from small animal bones, dry acacia seeds, and feathers from native birds. Traditional survival depended on hunting wallabies, emus, and searching for edible roots hidden beneath the burning sand. Along the shaded rock crevices, more than 600 plant species continue to survive, including desert palms, ancient Macrozamia cycads, and white eucalyptus trees clinging tightly to the canyon walls. As the sun begins sinking over the outback, the sandstone walls slowly shift from dark crimson to burning orange before fading into the color of smoldering coal deep inside the canyon. Rounded, eroded rock formations create a natural labyrinth known as the Lost City, while the underground waterhole called the Garden of Eden remains hidden beneath shadowed stone walls. The 3.7-mile rim walk follows the edge of the canyon, revealing the immense isolation of a landscape almost untouched by the modern world. In that harsh desert wilderness, life does not disappear. It retreats deeper beneath the ancient stone. The red cliffs of Kings Canyon resemble a section of earth torn open by time itself, exposing a primitive memory that still survives within the Australian interior. The surface of Lake Argyle stretches so far that many first-time visitors mistake it for an inland sea hidden among the red mountain ranges of Kimberley. Hundreds of small islands rise above water that constantly changes color under the tropical light of northern Australia. Few people realize that this enormous body of water was once only a dry valley deep inside the semi-arid northeastern corner of Western Australia. Plans to build a reservoir along the Ord River first appeared during the early 20th century as part of efforts to transform dry land into large-scale agricultural territory. In 1969, construction of the main dam began across Carboyd Gorge before completion 2 years later. Rising water quickly flooded the entire Argyle Downs Valley, once home to the historic cattle station of the famous colonial Duroc family. In 1996, the hydroelectric system expanded further to supply energy to the Argyle Diamond Mine and surrounding communities near Kununurra. The arrival of the reservoir created one of Australia's largest artificial wetland ecosystems. More than 30,000 freshwater crocodiles inhabit the calm waters surrounding rocky islands and reed-covered shorelines. The area also supports around 150 species of water birds and many native freshwater fish adapted to the flooded environment formed after the valley disappeared beneath the water. Along the edges grow flooded grasslands, water-tolerant shrubs, and low forests sustained by year-round water availability. From elevated viewpoints, the water reflects the dark red sandstone mountain ranges of the Carboyd system surrounding the vast basin. The main dam, rising about 220 feet high, cuts across the rocky gorge like an artificial wall in the middle of the Kimberley wilderness. Near the shoreline stands Lake Argyle Resort with its infinity pool facing water that seems to continue endlessly toward the horizon. Farther away is Argyle Downs Homestead, a restored stone house rebuilt after the original site disappeared beneath the reservoir. Lake Argyle now plays a vital role for the entire Ord River agricultural project by supplying water and electricity to eastern Kimberley. In a region constantly facing drought and extreme climate conditions, this reservoir has effectively become the lifeline determining the survival of the surrounding communities and industries. After hours of shaking along the red dirt Spring Creek track, the orange and black striped domes of Purnululu National Park suddenly appear within the Kimberley wilderness, where almost no signs of human presence exist. The national park lies deep inside eastern Western Australia, where dry plateaus and red dust stretch endlessly toward the horizon. That isolation has allowed the entire landscape to preserve a rare sense of untouched wilderness, even after receiving UNESCO World Heritage status. The sandstone layers here began forming about 375 million years ago beneath an ancient inland basin. The Kija people named this land Purnululu, meaning sandstone desert, and communities lived around the region for thousands of years. In 1987, the area became a national park before receiving UNESCO recognition in 2003 because of its exceptional geological and scenic value. More than 149 bird species and 81 reptile species inhabit the gorges and rocky domes of the park. Yellow-footed rock wallabies climb the steep sandstone cliffs, while wedge-tailed eagles circle above the striped rock formations searching for prey. Across the dry plains grow spinifex grass, boab trees, and drought-resistant acacia shrubs. Deep inside Echidna Chasm, living stonia palms and ghost gum trees survive, thanks to the rare moisture trapped between narrow rock walls. The famous Bungle domes display stripes formed by orange iron oxide and dark moisture-retaining cyanobacteria across the rock surface. Cathedral Gorge creates powerful natural echoes beneath its enormous stone chamber, while Echidna Chasm receives direct sunlight at the bottom for only a few brief moments each day. Aside from wooden walkways and isolated campsites, most of the landscape remains nearly unchanged after millions of years. Purnululu National Park has become an important center for ecotourism and geological research in eastern Kimberley. Yet the strongest impression here is still the feeling of wilderness that seems almost untouched by human control. Seen from above, Bungle Range resembles thousands of giant domes covered in orange and black stripes, isolated within the Kimberley wilderness. These unusual sandstone formations belong to Purnululu National Park, far from major roads, and surrounded almost entirely by dry plateaus and red dust across northern Western Australia. The rock layers here began forming about 375 million years ago, beneath an ancient inland basin during the Devonian period. Across tens of millions of years, uplift and erosion from wind and rain gradually shaped the domes and narrow gorges visible today. The Kija and Jaru peoples lived around this land for tens of thousands of years and considered many inner gorges sacred ceremonial sites. The outside world barely knew the mountains existed until a documentary crew filmed the area from the air in 1983. The Kija and Jaru communities still participate in managing the land alongside the government of Western Australia. During traditional ceremonies, bodies are covered with natural ochre, along with jewelry crafted from carved baobab seed shells and braided human hair. Daily life here remained connected to the deep gorges where indigenous communities collected ant honey, wild bush fruits, and hunted rock wallabies along the hot rocky slopes. The famous stripes of Bungle appear because of the contrast between orange iron oxide layers and dark gray bands of moisture-retaining cyanobacteria across the sandstone surface. Inside the mountain system stand Cathedral Gorge, with its enormous natural stone chamber, and Echidna Chasm, a narrow crack where sunlight reaches the bottom only during brief moments each day. Aside from wooden walkways and a few isolated campsites, most of the region remains almost completely untouched. Today, this place has become one of Australia's most famous geological symbols and an important research centre for fragile, ancient sandstone formations. Yet the strongest feeling here is still isolation, as if the entire mountain range had only recently been discovered. Where the red ranges of Australia's interior slowly disappear into the horizon, an enormous white emptiness begins to emerge across the dry center of the continent. Thanda Lake Eyre is the largest inland salt lake in Australia, located about 435 miles north of Adelaide in South Australia. The lake consists of two major basins connected by the narrow Goiter Channel, while its floor lies about 49 feet below sea level, the lowest natural point in the country. Around 30,000 years ago, the collapse of Earth's crust created a vast basin covering nearly 15% of the Australian continent. Over thousands of years, the region became a collection point for salt and sediment carried by inland rivers. In 1840, explorer Edward John Eyre became the first European to officially survey the Salt Lake. In 1964, Donald Campbell used the hardened salt surface to set a world land speed record of 403 miles per hour in the Bluebird 2. In 2012, the site officially received the dual name Thanda Lake Eyre in recognition of the traditional ownership of the Arabuna people. Along the bright white shores, the Arabuna and Dieri peoples have long viewed the water as a living entity capable of sleeping and awakening. During ancient dreaming ceremonies, bodies are covered with red and white ochre to recreate ancestral journeys across the endless salt desert. When the lake dries, life nearly disappears, leaving only salt-tolerant algae and cyanobacteria beneath the thick salt crust. But whenever floodwaters arrive from Queensland, the ecosystem rapidly transforms as freshwater fish, Australian pelicans, silver gulls, and thousands of migratory birds return to nest across the flooded basin. For most of the year, the lake appears as a blinding white salt desert, reflecting sunlight so intensely that the horizon nearly vanishes. In some areas, the salt crust reaches a thickness of about 20 inches, fractured into endless geometric patterns. But when floodwaters spread across the basin, The algae Dunaliella salina releases beta-carotene pigments that turn the entire lake pink-orange. Like an ancient ocean awakening in the middle of the desert. Across a landscape that barely allows life to survive, nature still quietly maintains a cycle that has lasted for tens of thousands of years. The enormous salt lake resembles the slow breathing of the Australian continent itself, silent for years, then suddenly overflowing with life after a single rare flood season. From a distance, Wilpena Pound does not resemble a mountain range, but the gigantic remains of land folded into itself. The closed rings of reddish-brown rock surround a massive natural basin, hidden within the Flinders Ranges of South Australia, about 267 miles north of Adelaide. The entire structure is isolated by steep mountain walls facing inward like an ancient geological labyrinth. Seen from above, Wilpena Pound resembles the surviving mark of a gigantic geological upheaval that began more than 800 million years ago. Ancient rock layers were bent upward through repeated tectonic cycles before wind and water slowly eroded them into the basin structure visible today. For the Adnyamathanha people, this land is known as Ikara and remains tied to ancestral stories passed down for countless generations. During the mid-19th century, Europeans entered the region to establish cattle stations. And later attempted farming inside the basin. But everything collapsed after flash floods destroyed the only trade route connecting the area with the outside world. Between the dry mountain ridges, life survives far more stubbornly than the landscape first suggests. Yellow-footed rock wallabies continue clinging to steep cliffs, while wedge-tailed eagles circle constantly above rising heat currents. Along rare, dry creek beds stand rows of red river gums and Australian cypress pines growing between drought-resistant shrubs. After darkness spreads across the basin, the only remaining sound is often the wind echoing against the enclosed rock walls surrounding the valley. Light changes constantly across Wilpena Pound throughout the day. In the morning, the mountain rings appear pale orange beneath cold mist. By late afternoon, the entire rock surface darkens into deep red and purple, beneath shadows stretching across the center of the basin. Viewed from St. Mary Peak, the enclosed structure becomes so clear that it resembles a gigantic crater more than a natural valley. Outside the mountain rim stand Old Wilpena Station, hiking trails, and small sightseeing aircraft moving quietly above the ancient rocks. Wilpena Pound remains the most important geological research and tourism center within the Flinders Ranges. Beyond science and scenery, Ikara is still considered sacred land by the Adnyamathanha people. A place where Earth's geological history and ancient indigenous memory seem to remain preserved beneath every layer of stone. At night, the Flinders Ranges almost completely lose every trace of artificial light. As desert temperatures fall and wind begins moving through the rocky passes, the entire mountain system becomes nothing more than black, ancient stone beneath a sky filled with stars above inland South Australia. This range stretches for about 267 miles from Port Pirie to Lake Calibana, forming the largest ancient mountain chain in South Australia within the Australian Outback. The rock layers of the Flinders Ranges already existed before complex life appeared on Earth. More than 800 million years ago, ancient seabed sediments began compressing and folding through tectonic movements lasting across countless geological eras. In 1946, geologist Reg Sprigg discovered Ediacaran fossils at Wilpena, the first evidence proving that complex multicellular organisms existed long before the age of dinosaurs. Yet long before scientific expeditions arrived, the Adnyamathanha people already lived here and viewed every canyon, water source, and red rock layer as part of their ancestral history. Mornings across the Flinders Ranges usually begin with pale red light covering sharp shale ridges. Groups of red kangaroos appear across the dry grasslands while wedge-tailed eagles circle slowly above rising heat currents. Along dry creek beds stand old eucalyptus trees and quandong bushes growing through cracked stone. In the past, the Adnyamathanha people wore cloaks made from marsupial hides to survive freezing desert nights while creating ceremonial objects from human hair, eagle feathers, and red ochre clay. Some roads through the Flinders Ranges create the feeling of crossing an exposed core of Earth itself. Brashina Gorge reveals ancient geological layers stacked like pages of history torn open across the desert. Farther away stand Wilpena Pound, the old copper mining town of Blinman. And the historic Pichi-Richi steam railway still moving through red mountain passes since the 19th century. By sunset, the entire mountain system darkens into deep crimson, before disappearing into the cold darkness of inland Australia. More than a mountain range, this place feels like a surviving fragment of Earth's distant memory. How many places in the modern world still preserve such a powerful sense of raw, ancient wilderness? The sound of water striking rock appears before Nitmiluk Gorge itself comes into view. The Katherine River moves silently between dark red sandstone walls, where sunlight nearly disappears from the dark water below. This gorge system lies in the northern part of the Northern Territory, near the edge of Arnhem Land, and is divided into 13 separate gorges by rocky rapids and natural waterfalls. Nobody knows exactly when the river first began cutting through the ancient sandstone. What is known is that the cliffs surrounding Nitmiluk already existed about 1.6 billion years ago, before the Katherine River gradually carved them into the stone labyrinth visible today. For the Jawoyn people, these waters are sacred territory connected to ancient dreaming stories still preserved today. During the 19th century, explorer John McDowell Stuart became the first European to reach this region. Yet only in 1989 was ownership of the land officially returned to the Jawoyn community after many years of legal struggle. The climate around Nitmiluk Gorge feels completely different from most of inland Australia. The air is more humid, vegetation grows thicker, and the river constantly attracts birds, fish, and reptiles along its banks. For generations, the Jawoyn people survived through natural resources such as barramundi, freshwater crabs, turtles, and wild fruits growing within the tropical woodland. During traditional ceremonies, bodies are painted with natural ochre, while necklaces crafted from fish bones, seeds, and bird feathers are worn. Some sections of Nitmiluk Gorge are so narrow that even the sound of a paddle echoes for a long time between sandstone walls, rising about 197 feet high. Viewed from above, the Katherine River resembles a dark ribbon, twisting endlessly between towering red cliffs. Small boat docks, forest trails, and isolated eco-lodges almost completely disappear once night falls, leaving behind a feeling of total isolation within the tropical wilderness of northern Australia. Beyond tourism and scenery, this place remains a vital freshwater system for the entire Catherine River Basin and one of Australia's most important ancient rock art archives. How many rivers in the world can still preserve the memory of stone, water, and human life across thousands of years? Termite mounds nearly as tall as an adult stand across the red ground of Litchfield National Park, all aligned along the same north-south axis with almost perfect precision. Within the humid tropical north of Australia, these earthen structures function like natural biological panels that allow termite colonies to regulate temperature during the harsh dry season. Surrounding them are open forests, freshwater pools, and sandstone cliffs where large waterfalls flow year-round. The sandstone foundation of Litchfield formed hundreds of millions of years ago through sediment accumulation and tectonic uplift. Since prehistoric times, the Makmak, Maranungu, Werat, and Waray peoples have lived around this land, surviving through freshwater streams and monsoon forests. In 1864, explorer Frederick Henry Litchfield surveyed the area, and his name was later used for the entire region. During the late 19th and early 20th centuries, copper mines, tin mines, and cattle stations appeared across the tropical wilderness before the land officially became a national park in 1986. Water is present everywhere in the life of Litchfield. Natural pools beneath the waterfalls became gathering places for humans, birds, animals, and plants during the hottest months of the year. Indigenous communities long depended on barramundi, freshwater shrimp, water lily roots, wild honey, and wallaby meat from this tropical ecosystem. During traditional ceremonies, bodies are covered with stripes of red ochre and white clay, combined with jewelry crafted from banyan bark fibers and forest seeds. At Wangi Falls and Florence Falls, water drops directly from high rock shelves into dark green pools, surrounded by dense monsoon forest. The air around the cliffs remains cool and humid, completely different from the dry interior landscapes beyond the park. Along wooden walkways and floating bridges come the sounds of insects, tropical birds, and the smell of wet earth rising after northern monsoon rains. Today, this place remains one of the most important tourism centers in the Northern Territory, while also protecting freshwater systems and tropical ecosystems unique to northern Australia. How many places in the world still allow nature to function in such an almost untouched rhythm? "135 stone steps descend toward a dark green pool hidden beneath Florence Falls, where cold mist constantly clings to the red sandstone cliffs of tropical northern Australia. Two parallel waterfalls plunge more than 33 feet directly into the crystal-clear basin below, creating a humid forest pocket, almost completely separated from the dry and sunburned landscapes surrounding Litchfield National Park. The rock layers of Florence Falls experienced hundreds of millions of years of fracturing and erosion before underground water finally found an escape route through the sandstone plateau of Tabletop Range. For the Mak Maranungu people, this place long served as an important spiritual and hunting territory connected to ancestral history. During the colonial era, European survey teams crossed the region and named the site after relatives of the explorers before the entire area entered strict environmental protection when Litchfield National Park was established in 1986. Directly beneath the waterfalls survives an ecosystem completely different from the surrounding outback. Ancient ferns, woody vines, and freshwater almond trees grow densely around the edge of the pool because flowing water remains constant throughout the year. Within the humid forest canopy live kingfishers, large fruit bats, and small native fish inhabiting the dark freshwater below the falls. The air here always carries the smell of wet stone, decaying leaves, and cold moisture drifting from narrow rock crevices beneath the monsoon forest. Viewed from the upper lookout, Florence Falls resembles two white streams slicing directly through a wall of brick-red sandstone before disappearing into the dark green canopy below. Along the Shady Creek Trail stand small wooden bridges, exposed tree roots, and the sound of water echoing through the low tropical forest. When the northern monsoon season begins, rising water levels fill the entire valley with mist and the constant thunder of falling water day and night. Beyond being one of the most recognizable tourism symbols of the Northern Territory, this place also plays an important role in monitoring freshwater systems and tropical biodiversity across monsoon ecosystems in Australia. How many waterfalls in the world still preserve such a raw and untouched wilderness? Warning signs about crocodiles stand directly beside the waterline of Wangi Falls, yet behind them remains an almost perfect green pool beneath two enormous white waterfalls. A sense of danger and tropical beauty coexist within a narrow space surrounded by monsoon forest in northern Australia. From sandstone cliffs rising about 171 feet high, water falls continuously into the wide basin near the edge of the Tabletop Range Plateau inside Litchfield National Park. The flowing water of Wangi Falls exists year-round because underground water systems remain trapped within the ancient sandstone layers of the plateau. For the Makmak Maranungu people, this place has long been sacred territory connected with feminine spiritual energy and strict traditional rules about approaching water sources. During the second half of the 20th century, the area gradually opened to large-scale tourism. However, every wet season, floodwaters from surrounding wetlands can carry saltwater crocodiles deep into the pool beneath the falls, forcing periodic closures of the entire area. The pool at Wangi Falls often becomes so calm that it perfectly reflects the red cliffs and tropical forest above. Yet inside the dark rock shelters behind the waterfalls, thousands of fruit bats hang across the stone walls, filling the air with humid odors and chaotic sounds lasting through the evening. Along the shoreline grow dense tree ferns, freshwater almond trees, and tropical pandanus plants adapted to permanent heat and humidity. Honey eaters, barramundi, and freshwater crocodiles regularly appear within the enclosed ecosystem surrounding the pool. Wooden bridges through the forest and elevated lookouts allow visitors to view the waterfalls from across the basin. When the northern monsoon season arrives, rising water levels cover the red cliffs with mist and transform the area around the pool into a rainforest pocket, almost completely isolated from the dry outback landscapes beyond the park. Even the air itself feels heavier because of humidity, insects, and the smell of wet tropical vegetation covering the forest floor. Wangi Falls remains the most important tourism destination inside Litchfield National Park, while also serving as a critical monitoring zone for water flow, predator movement, and seasonal climate change across northern Australia. As darkness slowly settles across the forest and the pool becomes silent, the strongest remaining feeling is that this place still belongs more to nature than to people. A gigantic circle standing alone within the red sands of Western Australia transformed Wolfe Creek Crater into one of the world's most remarkable meteorite impact remnants. This site lies near the northern edge of the Great Sandy Desert, about 93 miles south of Halls Creek, and can only be reached through the dusty Tanami dirt road surrounded by sharp rocks and harsh desert climate conditions lasting throughout the year. Around 120,000 years ago, a nickel-iron meteorite weighing nearly 14,000 tons struck Earth at a speed of about 9 miles per second, creating a massive collision that deformed the entire desert rock layer. The remaining structure is an almost perfect circular crater with a diameter of about 2,887 feet, rock walls reaching 115 feet high, and a crater floor approximately 197 feet deep. Western explorers only discovered the area in 1947 during aerial oil surveys before the Western Australian government placed the entire region under strict protection in 1976. Moisture trapped inside the crater, together with underground water sources, created an unusually green vegetation zone within the dry desert. Clusters of paperbark trees, acacias, and honey eucalyptus grow around the crater floor, forming a natural oasis where Major Mitchell's cockatoos and ring-tailed dragon lizards appear more frequently than in surrounding areas. Small mammals usually become active only at sunrise or sunset to avoid the extreme heat rising from the desert ground. Today, the area also contains a self-sufficient campground and walking trail leading toward the crater rim for geology research, camping, and astrophotography tourism. Looking down from the crater rim, the entire basin resembles a giant bowl covered with reddish-brown desert stone and narrow green vegetation strips growing through dry sand. At sunset, shadows from the crater walls stretch across low shrubs and rough rock formations, creating strong contrast between glowing orange light and the darkening desert landscape. During nighttime, the absence of artificial light allows thousands of stars to appear clearly above the ancient meteorite circle. As darkness slowly covers the Great Sandy Desert, the ancient meteorite crater gradually disappears into silence beneath a sky filled with stars. Red rock layers and traces of cosmic collision continue making Wolfe Creek Crater one of Australia's most mysterious natural landscapes. A narrow, dark gap opens between two towering red cliffs where a white stream of water falls straight downward before almost disappearing into the shadow below. From the elevated viewing platforms of Tolmer Falls, the gorge beneath resembles a deep fracture inside the plateau rather than an ordinary tropical pool. There are no paths leading to the water, no swimming areas, and almost no human noise near the base of the falls. Tolmer Creek spent millions of years cutting through ancient sandstone layers to create the narrow gorge visible today. Indigenous communities long considered the surrounding area an important hunting territory and spiritual space before European expeditions entered the region during the 19th century. The site was later named after Alexander Tolmer, a police officer and explorer from colonial South Australia. By the late 20th century, authorities completely banned access to the pool beneath the falls in order to protect the fragile habitat of rare bat species declining across Australia. Hidden deep inside the humid rock crevices beneath the waterfalls live ghost bats and orange horseshoe bats, two of Australia's rarest protected flying mammals. Above the cliff edges grow drought-resistant shrubs, typical of northern tropical landscapes. But deeper inside the gorge, the humidity increases and vegetation gradually changes into dense monsoon rainforest. Aside from the distant echo of falling water, most of the surrounding area remains almost completely silent. The 0.99-mile Tolmer Falls Walk guides visitors through open woodland, before ending at steel viewing platforms, extending close to the cliff edge. From there, the waterfall appears like a narrow streak of light plunging into darkness, hidden between enormous brick-red sandstone walls. The entire atmosphere feels isolated from the busier tourist sections elsewhere inside Litchfield National Park. This area now plays a critical role in maintaining stable breeding populations of several endangered bat species in northern Australia. Perhaps the strict limits placed on human access are exactly what allowed the hidden wilderness beneath those cliffs to survive almost untouched until today. Deep, dark red gorges carved through an ancient rocky plateau transformed Karijini National Park into one of Australia's most impressive wilderness regions. This national park lies within the Hamersley Range, in the Pilbara region of northwestern Western Australia, approximately 655 miles from Perth. Covering more than 1.5 million acres, Karijini stretches across scorching plateaus, almost completely isolated from coastal settlements. The geological history of this land began around 2.5 billion years ago when iron-rich sediments settled beneath an ancient ocean floor. Across millions of years, water and wind gradually carved the plateau's surface into steep gorges and deep pools hidden among red stone walls. Evidence of human habitation here dates back between 20,000 and 30,000 years. In 1861, explorer Francis Thomas Gregory led the first European survey reaching this region. By 1969, Western Australia officially established the protected area under the name Hamersley Range National Park, before renaming it Karijini National Park in 1991 to recognize traditional Indigenous ownership. Karijini is sacred land belonging to the Banijima, Kurrama, and Yinhawangka Aboriginal communities. In the Banijima language, Karijini means place of many hills. For thousands of years, Indigenous residents practiced fire stick farming to naturally regenerate ecosystems. During ceremonies, ochre clay was painted across the body to connect spiritually with Dreamtime traditions. Local people also collected sweet nectar from Cardaniba trees and used minijara leaves as traditional medicine. Viewed from above, Karijini resembles a gigantic maze of dark red cracks slicing through the dry Pilbara plateau. Twisting gorges cast deep shadows between orange-red rock formations, while Fern Pool and Circular Pool appear as bright turquoise lakes hidden beneath canyon walls. Clusters of spinifex grass and mulga trees create striking contrast against the scorching stone landscape stretching endlessly toward the horizon. Beneath late sunlight reflecting across dark red rock layers and deep blue canyon waters, Karijini National Park appears like a surviving fragment from Earth's ancient past. This ecological buffer zone continues holding immense importance among the world's largest iron ore mining regions within Pilbara. Endless red mountain ranges beneath the scorching skies of Western Australia transformed Pilbara into one of the country's most extraordinary regions. This area lies across the northern part of Western Australia, stretching from the Indian Ocean coastline to the edge of the Northern Territory. Cities such as Karratha, Port Hedland, and Newman appear scattered among red rocky plateaus, semi-desert plains, and enormous mining zones almost completely isolated from the rest of the country. The geological foundation of Pilbara belongs to the Pilbara Craton, one of the oldest surviving sections of Earth's crust, with an age exceeding 3.6 billion years. Rock formations here still preserve stromatolite fossils, traces of the earliest life forms ever appearing on the planet. During the 1960s, discoveries of gigantic iron ore deposits completely transformed this territory. Industrial railways, ports, and massive mining complexes rapidly expanded, turning Pilbara into Australia's most important industrial and mineral export centre. More than 30 Aboriginal language groups lived across this region for thousands of years, including the Ngarluma, Yinjibarndi, and Martu peoples. On the Burrup Peninsula, millions of ancient rock engravings still remain across desert cliffs, reflecting the spiritual beliefs and lifestyles of prehistoric indigenous communities. Modern life within Pilbara is instead closely connected with industrial towns, FIFO workers, off-road vehicles, and reflective safety clothing under the region's nearly year-round dry heat. Pilbara's landscape is dominated by iron-rich mountain ranges colored deep red, vast spinifex grass plains, and dry riverbeds only filled during seasonal storms. Red kangaroos, dingoes, wedge-tailed eagles, and many desert reptiles inhabit this harsh land. While the coastline supports untouched coral reefs and thriving mangrove forests. Destinations such as Karijini National Park and the Dampier Archipelago have become major ecotourism attractions in Western Australia. Beneath sunset light spreading across the dark red iron mountains and long ore trains crossing the desert, Pilbara appears both wild and industrial at the same time. This ancient territory continues holding a crucial role within Australia's economy and the global mineral market. Light nearly disappears when descending into Hancock Gorge, where narrow rock passages barely allow cold water to flow through the dry red plateau of Pilbara. This canyon lies inside Karijini National Park near the Weano area, and approximately 655 miles north of Perth. The entire region is strictly protected as a geological research and wilderness exploration area within the isolated semi-desert landscapes of Western Australia. Hancock Gorge began forming more than 2.5 billion years ago, when iron-rich sediments settled beneath an ancient ocean floor and gradually transformed into banded ironstone and dolomite under enormous geological pressure. After the sea retreated, ancient rivers continuously eroded natural fractures, creating canyon walls reaching nearly 328 feet deep. The rusty red cliffs formed because of massive iron oxidation occurring across millions of years. This land also remained the traditional territory of the Banejima, Kurama, and Inawanga peoples for more than 20,000 years, before becoming part of the Karijini conservation system. Water and rare humidity within the canyon create an environment completely different from the scorching plateau above. Pilbara olive pythons, dragon lizards, and several snake species appear around natural pools, while wedge-tailed eagles and peregrine falcons inhabit the towering cliffs. The upper plateau mainly contains spinifex grass and white eucalyptus trees, yet deep inside the canyon, ferns, reeds, and cajuput trees survive because of permanent underground water sources. Viewed from Oxer Lookout, Hancock Gorge resembles a gigantic crack cutting through the dark red stone layers of Pilbara. Massive canyon walls shift from orange-red to purple-bronze beneath changing sunlight, while Kermit's Pool stands out with bright turquoise water hidden deep below the cliffs. Narrow sections, such as Spider Walk, force explorers to brace both hands and feet against opposite rock walls while crossing cold, rushing water beneath them. As evening light slowly fades across the deep red canyon walls and blue waters darken beneath the cliffs, Hancock Gorge feels like an ancient world still surviving within the Pilbara semi-desert. The canyon continues holding exceptional importance for geological research and ecological balance in inland Western Australia. Beyond the blinding salt flats where the horizon almost disappears entirely, the red dunes of the Simpson Desert begin stretching endlessly across the dry heart of Australia. This desert extends through South Australia, Queensland, and the southeastern Northern Territory, famous for more than 1,100 parallel sand dunes rising between 33 and 131 feet high, frozen like giant red waves across the wilderness. The desert formed around 10,000 years ago during the Holocene period, when Australia's climate became extremely arid. Strong winds blowing across the ancient Lake Eyre basin gathered sediment into massive dune lines, stretching for hundreds of miles. In 1845, explorer Charles Sturt became the first European to see the region while searching for a mythical inland sea. In 1929, geologist Cecil Madigan surveyed the desert by Eyre and named it after Alfred Allen Simpson. By 1936, Ted Colson became the first European to successfully cross the entire desert using a camel caravan. Before European arrival, the Wankanguru people were the only community to live permanently within this harsh desert. Their survival depended on mikiri, underground water wells hidden beneath the dunes. During traditional ceremonies, bodies were covered with red ochre and animal fat to recreate ancient dreaming stories. Food came mainly from desert rats, lizards, Nankuru grass seeds, and larvae living inside acacia roots. Despite the extremely low rainfall, spinifex grass still anchors the dunes, while the lower valleys support gidgee trees and highly adapted species such as thorny devils and inland taipans. As hot winds sweep across the desert surface, the red dunes constantly shift shape beneath the sunlight. From above, more than 1,100 parallel dunes stretch like endless red lines cutting across central Australia. Near Birdsville on the eastern edge, the Big Red Dune rises more than 131 feet high, while rough tracks like the French Line and WAA Line almost disappear within the vast ocean of sand. Beneath that near-total silence, the desert still hides an ancient ecosystem that has survived for thousands of years with almost no human interference. Those endless red sand waves resemble the remains of a primitive world where nature still holds absolute control over life itself. Beyond the red sand oceans where signs of human life almost completely disappear, the town of Coober suddenly emerges in the dry deserts of South Australia like a settlement from another world. Located about 528 miles north of Adelaide along the Stuart Highway, the town is globally famous for its underground homes built deep beneath the earth to escape the extreme heat of the Australian Outback. The town's history began in 1915 when a boy named Willie Hutchison accidentally discovered opal during a gold prospecting trip across this barren land. After World War I, former soldiers and European immigrants arrived to mine the region and transformed old excavation trenches into underground dwellings. In 1920, the settlement officially received the name Coober, derived from the indigenous phrase Kupa Piti, meaning white man's hole. Over the decades, it gradually became the world's largest opal mining center, supplying much of the global, high-quality gemstone market. Beneath the burning sandstone of the desert, more than half of Coober Pedi's residents live inside dugouts, underground homes maintaining stable temperatures around 73 to 77 degrees Fahrenheit throughout the year. The community includes immigrants from more than 40 countries, especially Greece, the former Yugoslavia, and Germany. Daily life revolves around red, dust-covered jeans, wide-brimmed hats, and opal workshops hidden beneath the surface. Above ground, the dry landscape contains little more than saltbush shrubs, wandering dingoes, and the massive dingo fence stretching near the town's edge. Seen from above, the entire region resembles the surface of a deserted planet covered with thousands of pink and white cone-shaped mining pits scattered across the desert. Mounds of excavated earth form artificial hills stretching toward the horizon. Beneath the rocky surface exists an underground world of churches, hotels, bars, and museums carved directly into sandstone. Not far from town, the colorful mesas of the Breakaways cast long shadows across the red valleys of South Australia. Coober Pedy is not only the world's largest opal center, but also a symbol of human survival in one of Australia's harshest deserts. Its underground lifestyle transformed an almost uninhabitable land into one of the planet's most unique desert communities.